raise your hand if you've ever asked God to remove whoever is not for you or whoever is not aligned with your life from your life. And that prayer was answered incredibly fast. I know for me, I can think of a couple of times in which I have made that prayer for God to either just straight remove the person or for Him to show me that this person was not meant to be in my life. And He answered it with a quickness. In one case, I'm going to give two examples that involve romantic relationships, although we're about to talk about this. It's not always romantic. But I remember in one case, I prayed that prayer. And even as I was praying it, this was back when I was single, and even as I was praying it, I was thinking of this guy that we weren't serious, but I kind of started seeing him, and I just was not sure about him. Just something seemed off about him, right? So I prayed that prayer. Hey, God, if this person isn't aligned with my life, just remove them, right? And I kid you not, the next day he ended up getting arrested, right? And I can think of another case where I asked God to just show me whether or not the relationships in my life were aligned. And again, I prayed this as like a general relationship prayer because I felt like I was just very stagnant in my life. And, there's a saying about you are the company that you keep. So I really just wanted some guidance on the company that I was keeping, whether or not it was really aligned with where I needed to go in life, right? So that could have been friends, romantic relationships, that could have been, family members, whoever. I just wanted God to show me, to reveal to me, what wasn't in alignment. And in this case, I was actually shown things about more than one person, but the romantic situation in this case was I had been seeing this guy and he worked out of town frequently. So there was this whole thing of where, like, for a few weeks, whenever he was in town, so whenever we were together and I'd see him, I was getting all of these weird skin reactions. Like I was breaking out in hives and stuff, right? And when he would go out of town, so, we weren't around each other, all of a sudden my skin would clear up. Everything was perfectly fine, right? And it just happened. It happened like 3 different times. You know what I mean? It happened too many times for it to just be a coincidence. And that was all I needed to see. So that is what we are talking about today. About learning to heed the warnings that a relationship is not aligned with God's best for you. So, welcome to Christianish. My name is Keshia Rice. I am a dating coach and hypnotherapist. I help women learn how to heal from their unhealthy relationship patterns and attract loving, healthy, cherished relationships. And before we get started, I want to be clear. When I say that people may not be aligned with you, sometimes that is a case of for now, right? My husband and I were actually having this discussion the other day, and we were talking about times that we've been friends with people, and we've had to remove that person from our life because it was clear that the direction in which we were going or growing and the direction in which that person was going or growing didn't mesh, right? Like we weren't growing together with the other person. And about how there have been cases where, you know, situations like that are never easy, especially if you were at one point close with someone and then, you're getting that pull, that nudge that it's time to separate from them. But we're also talking about how there are cases where, we've let people out of our lives, we've let go of them, and it's been permanent. And there have also been cases where circumstances change and that person is able to come back into our lives somehow. But about how even then, the relationship is not the same. It is oftentimes a better relationship, but it is a different relationship because you're re-entering it. Both of you as different people, right? You went through a period of growth, and maybe at the time that person was not in that same period of growth. So you went through your period, you've grown, you've changed, and then later on things happen in that other person's life, and then they go through a period of growth and they change and things about them are different, so that now when you come back together, it is a completely different relationship. It's not the same relationship that you had like when the two of you were kids. It is now a relationship on a different foundation, on a different level of maturity. So this is not supposed to be one of these recordings where you listen and you get all hyped up about how you're just so much better now, and you're looking down on people as you're letting go. And you're also thinking that, like, this is also not one of those episodes where you listen to and be afraid of losing people, because whenever we lose, I truly believe that it's just clearing space for God to do better, right? But also the loss isn't always permanent. So sometimes you just have to truly trust the process. Now, that being said, let me get into these signs, because just full transparency, this is going to be a short recording because it is late as I record this and I need to get to bed. And it's also just late on. You guys should thank my assistant, Jave. She is a complete angel because I'm always pushing up against deadlines with her on recording these episodes. But yes, so let's get into the to the signs that a relationship is not aligned. The first sign is that you are just uncomfortable. I have this conversation all the time when it comes to abusive relationships, and people will come to me and ask, why is it that a friend of theirs who is clearly in an abusive relationship, sometimes physically abusive, sometimes just emotionally abusive, verbally abusive, but why is it that everyone can clearly see this person is in an abusive situation and yet they won't leave? They won't dump the person, right? And my response to that is always that people do not get up from tables until they are full. And that can be hard. It can be hard to watch someone that you love continuously put themselves into a bad situation or remain in a bad situation. But until that person has had enough of it, they are not going to leave. Now, for you, I hope sincerely that the level at which you leave is low, that it does not take too much of being uncomfortable for you to go. Because so often I see this in situations where women end up in relationships for 5, 10, 15, 20 years that end badly, and they knew, they were in this relationship for 10 years. They knew in year 6 that things were going to end badly. And yet they still kept justifying, trying to stick it out, making excuses for that ain't ish man, right? And trying to oftentimes trying to avoid sunk cost fallacy, which when you think about it, makes no sense, right? you've been in a relationship for a year and you keep trying to make it work because you don't want to feel bad about the year that you wasted in this relationship. And instead, things explode in year 5 or year 10 to the point where it is no longer sustainable. You don't have anything else to give because you've given everything that you have. Or even worse, you put up with it for 5, 10 years and then the other person leaves. And now at year 1, you could have left and been a little bit upset about the year that you wasted. Instead, you end up wasting 5 or 10 years. When you start to consistently feel uncomfortable in a relationship, you really need to start evaluating why is that? Why is it that you feel uncomfortable? I think of that old spiritual, that like old church mothers used to sing, there's a leak in this old building and my soul has got to move. Sometimes your soul just knows, and you may not be able to put your finger on why, but it just knows that it's time for you to move. Which kind of brings me to the second point, is that you are constantly getting the ick. And I'm separating this from just a general uncomfortable feeling because sometimes you just have that general uncomfortable feeling and you don't know why. You can't put a finger on why it is or where it started. Whereas oftentimes icks have something that you can point to. And what I mean by this is you're in a relationship with someone, and again, it doesn't have to be romantic. It could be friendship. It could be a family member. But you're in this relationship and you've known for a while that this relationship is not ideal, but you feel like it's okay. You feel like things aren't terrible. You could stay in this relationship for a while. It's all good. It's fine, right? And then the day comes that this person does or says something specific. And after that moment, there is no turning back. Now you constantly think about this moment and how it turned you off and how you don't want to deal with this person anymore. And you can try to ignore it for a while, right? And this person, the other person, may start doing things to try to improve the relationship, the other issues that you have in the relationship, right? But no matter how much things improve, or no matter how much you try to push that feeling aside, your mind keeps going back to that one memory, that one thing they said, that one thing that they did. And no matter how hard you try, you can't unsee it. You can't unhear it. This is God just being more specific with you, right? Because most likely there were other things before this that, back to point number 1, you were feeling uncomfortable in the relationship. But now, because you ignored that general uncomfortable feeling, you're now receiving something specific that you should definitely take heed to. And then the third thing that is a sign that this relationship is unaligned is when the relationship starts impacting your health. So that's why at the beginning of this, I told you about the dude that when he and I were together, I would break out in hives. I would get skin issues. Like, I felt like I was allergic to my boyfriend at the time, right? And I can laugh about that now, but how many times do we see that in relationships? Maybe not something that drastic, where you're physically manifesting signs of relationship being not being in alignment with you. But how many times have you been in a relationship with someone and all of a sudden, whenever you're around this person, you are suddenly tired all the time, fatigued all the time? because being around this person just drains your energy. How often do you have someone in your life, and when you start thinking about spending time with this person, being around this person, you start to get anxiety? You get this uneasy feeling in the pit of your stomach. How often have you been around a person and you notice that even if there wasn't like a fight with them or anything like that, but when you're around them, you have headaches more often, right? The body truly does keep the score. And oftentimes, if our brains cannot get to us, if our logic and reasoning and our emotional intelligence can't convince us to leave a relationship, then the physical signs will start to kick in. Again, this feeling of unease near a person, the increased headaches, the feeling drained when you're around them. People who are aligned with where you're going in life and aligned with your goals and the purpose that God has for you, those people will light you up. You will want to spend more time with them. And you will want to spend more time with them as a desire to be around them because you feel energized around them, because they lift you up. Not you try to spend more time with them because you feel like you should, because the relationship looks good on paper, or because you've spent so much time in the relationship that you feel like you have to keep that up. When people energize you, that is what you should run towards. And when they drain you, that is what you should run away from. So again, I am going to keep this short, but to continue this conversation, send me a message on Instagram, on TikTok, or on YouTube. I'm at Keshia Rice. And let me know, when was the last time you were in a situation like this? What were the signs that you were getting that someone was not aligned with you and where you were going in life? And be honest, how many warnings did it take for you to actually leave that situation? And if you need help with sorting through these types of feelings, figuring out who's aligned with you, and figuring out how to call in your purpose partner and to attract someone who is going to cherish you and help you live out the purpose that is on your life, I would love to help you with that. You can check the link in the show notes or YouTube description, depending on where you're listening to this. And you can schedule a call and we can talk about what joining my From Toxic to Thriving program looks like. So I will talk to you soon. Love you so much. Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.